I've worn the same uniform for 23 years now. I work for the National Park Service. Not gonna say which park. I'm still employed, and I like my pension where it is. But I've spent most of my life in forests so deep, you can walk for 2 days and not see another soul. Places where cell service isn't just weak, it's never existed. City folks come out here and think they're in a postcard. Trees, birds, lakes, all that. What they don't realize is the woods are older than anything they've ever known, and old places don't always like being disturbed. Some nights, when the wind's quiet and the ranger station's radio isn't chirping, I start remembering things. Not just the lost hikers or the accidents. I'm talking about the ones we don't write reports for. The ones that don't make sense, no matter how you turn them over in your head. I'll tell you some. If you learn anything from these stories, I hope you learn to be careful and respect the forest. Okay, here's the first one. It started like a lot of cases do. Family camping trip. Summer. One of the remote campsites. A couple hours hike off the trailhead. Mom, Dad, 2 kids, and a dog. The younger one, a boy, 7 years old, took off after the dog, chasing something into the woods. Only the dog came back. Now, when a kid goes missing, we don't wait. Everyone's on alert. We brought in helicopters, tracking dogs, full search teams, volunteers. People came in from towns I'd never heard of. The first thing that bothered me, there weren't any prints. The ground was soft, should have been easy. But there were only faint tracks right at the campsite, and then nothing. On the 3rd day, I found something. A single footprint. Small, barefoot, in the middle of a dried-out creek bed, almost 11 miles from where he disappeared. No other prints around it. No signs of a fall. Just one perfect print, like he'd stepped there and vanished again. We never found the boy. We kept looking. For weeks. A year later, a hiker flagged something for us. A piece of clothing stuck in a pine tree. 20 feet up, bright red, still vivid despite the weather. A hoodie. We checked the tag. It was his. No blood. No tears. Just up there, like someone had hung it on a hook. The tree showed no signs of damage. No broken branches. No one could have climbed it without leaving a trace. We took it down, logged it, stored it, but nobody talks about it. What is there to say anyway? You get used to not getting your questions answered at this job. Anyways, here's the next one. Her name was Lynn, 64. She'd done more wilderness marathons than I've had birthdays. Sharp. Always filed the right paperwork. Always packed smart. She set out alone, just a 1-day hike around the lake loop. Signed in at the station. Last seen by another group around noon. She smiled, waved, said the weather was perfect. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Search started within 12 hours. We found her backpack tucked under a rock ledge 4 miles off trail. Nothing scattered. It looked placed, like someone took care to keep it dry. Food untouched. Water half full. Navigation device inside. Battery dead. 2 days later, her boots were found, 1 mile away, side by side in the middle of a meadow. Clean. No scuffs, and no footprints. I mean that literally. The ground around them was untouched, like they'd been dropped from the sky. We kept searching. 2 months later, a group of hunters stumbled on her. She was sitting against a tree stump, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap, like she was meditating. Except she'd been gone for over 60 days, and the body looked like she'd died maybe 2 days ago. No bloating, no insect activity. Her face still had color. Coroner couldn't explain it. Official cause of death was exposure, but the way she looked, it's like the forest preserved her. I'd never seen anything like this before, and I don't expect I will again. When the coroner and every senior park ranger on the team is stumped, there's no point in speculating. I guess I'll keep going. This next one is short, but it happened to me. I don't know if they makes you believe it more or less. I just want to get it off my chest. It's one of those stories where you tell another park worker about it, and they just chalk it up to seeing weird things in the forest, as if other people seeing weird things makes it normal. It was early fall, dry season, and I was up in one of the old fire towers overnight. Great view. Total isolation. Around 2 a.m, I hear it. 3 short whistles. The universal distress signal. I radioed it in. No one else was supposed to be out there. No hikers, no patrols. We don't normally leave the tower at night if we're staying there. Too dangerous considering the wildlife that could be in the shadows out of sight. The active fire towers usually have at least a rifle stored there, but this tower was strictly used for overnight stays by rangers on expeditions or emergency search parties needing shelter. My radio contact told me to wait for further signals before doing anything. A few minutes later, I hear it again. Only this time, it's closer, louder. I grab my binoculars, sweep the tree line. Nothing. Just trees swaying a bit in the wind. But then I see movement. A shape. It looked like a person. Tall, thin, grey hoodie or coat, I thought. But the way it moved, it didn't walk. It sort of flowed between the trees. No bounce, no sway. Just straight motion. Smooth, like it was on a track. It stopped right at the edge of the clearing below the tower. Just far enough that the lights attached to the tower didn't reach its face. Then it whistled. Same pattern. 3 notes. But this time it sounded off. Not natural. Like someone imitating a whistle. Just a little wrong. Too flat. Too perfect. Like an instrument rather than an organic whistling sound. At this point, I'm completely freaked out. I had that gut feeling that something was terribly wrong. I remember calling out from the top of the tower, "Hey, do you need help?" No response, no movement. "Hello?" The shape slightly retracted into the trees, no longer visible. I grabbed my radio. What do I even say? Before I could make that decision, I heard that whistle one more time. 3 notes. I froze. If someone needs help, why are they hiding in the tree line? Why aren't they responding to my calls? It didn't feel right. I watched for a few more minutes, listening closely. I didn't see anything at the tree line again that night. I didn't sleep either. One thing that still bothers me about that night is that I swear I heard those 3 whistles again later that night, further away this time. Whether that was a person or something else, they were walking around the forest, just whistling a distress pattern. To be honest, I didn't call main camp over the radio again. I just didn't know what to even report. I was still green, and I needed that job. I didn't want to be the guy with the crazy stories. I didn't want the attention. When I climbed down the next morning, I checked the dirt around the base. There were footprints leading from the tree line to the base of the tower. Coming in, none going out. The prints themselves, unrecognizable. I still avoid that area as much as possible in my day-to-day work. This next one's short too, but it always made the hair on my arms stand up, mostly because of how normal it started. There's a spot we call Echo Hill. Not the real name, obviously. It's about 5 miles out from the visitor center. Easy climb, nice views. Tourists love it. One summer, we started getting reports of a man shouting for help near the overlook. A few different visitors said they heard someone yelling, "Hey, over here!" That kind of thing, down in the trees below the ridge. So we sent a ranger up to check it out. He stayed overnight, didn't hear anything. Next week, same report. Different group. Says it sounded like a man, maybe injured, shouting the same phrase again and again. So we send a pair of rangers this time. They radio in that they can hear it too. But every time they try to triangulate it, it moves. Never closer, never further, just shifting. Eventually, they call it a prank. Hikers with a speaker, maybe. We post a sign about false emergency calls, hoping that would scare off whoever was doing it. But here's where it gets strange. A week later, we got another emergency radio call. Only this time, it's from a solo hiker. Says he heard someone yelling for help again. Same place, same voice. So he left the trail to try to find the guy. He says he walked down toward the sound for over an hour, and every time he thought he was getting close, the voice would move again. Never frantic, just steady, calling out the same thing. Eventually he realized he didn't know where he was anymore. No trail, no signal, no way to orient himself. We had to send a search team out to find him. Took 2 days. He was dehydrated, shaken up. Said the voice stopped about an hour before we found him. Last thing he told my coworker before we put him in the truck. I don't think it was trying to get help. I think it wanted me to keep following. He's lucky he was able to contact us. Doubt he would have found his way back. Here's another one. Not that scary, I guess, but weird. There's a clearing in one of the older sections of the park. Nobody really uses it. It's technically inside our borders, but the trails don't go there, and unless you're navigating with a topographic map, you'd never find it. I only came across it once. This was probably 15 years ago. I was doing a perimeter walk, basically checking for illegal campsites, trash, anything off trail. I came over a small rise and there it was, this little log cabin, maybe 12 by 12 feet. Old, but solid. Looked like it had been there a while. No chimney. One window. Door was shut. The weird thing was, no trail. No path in. No path out. No tire marks. Just tall grass, untouched all around it, like the clearing had swallowed it whole. I walked up, knocked on the door. Nothing. Tried to open it. Stuck like it hadn't moved in years. Peered in through the window. Couldn't see much. Just shadows and what looked like a table. Figured it was some old trapper's hut from before the land was federal. I marked the coordinates, took a photo, and kept moving. 2 days later, I pulled up the GPS to log it officially. Nothing there. No photo on my camera either. Just gone. A few years later, I went back with a buddy who knew the area. We searched for 2 hours. Same spot. Same trees. Same little rise. No cabin. He joked that I'd hallucinated it. But I remember the texture of the wood. I remember the sound of my boots on the porch. The feeling in my gut that said, "Don't go inside." And I still have a page in my field notebook that just says one thing: cabin, no path. I've only got a few more to share for today. This one still gets to me more than I like to admit. This one happened during a group rescue. Real straightforward call. Hiker took a fall on one of the steeper backcountry trails. Fractured their leg pretty bad. We got the alert around 2 p.m., and by the time we reached them, the sun was starting to drop. We splintered them, got them secured in the stretcher, and started hauling out. This was one of those narrow trails that switchbacks hard through heavy timber. You can't see more than 20, 30 feet ahead or behind at any time. It makes radio contact really important, especially with 6 of us carrying weight and trying not to lose footing. We were stretched out over maybe 150 yards, single file, with one ranger assigned to bring up the rear. I'll call him Mitch. About 45 minutes into the carryout, Mitch radios in and says, "Hey, who's coming up behind us?" "Someone in the front." I think it was our lead, Carla. Radios back. "What do you mean?" Mitch says he's been hearing footsteps behind him. Light ones. Consistent. He figured someone from the secondary team had come up late to assist. Maybe a volunteer or another ranger catching up. Problem is, we did a head count at the start. All 6 of us were accounted for. Nobody else was dispatched up that trail. And we told him that. Then there's a pause on the line. Mitch squeaks out, "Okay," over the radio. About 5 minutes pass, and then he radios in again. Voice is lower now. Uneasy. He says, "It's still back there. It walks when I walk. Stops when I stop. I haven't seen a face. Just a shape in the trees, keeping pace with me." That got our attention real quick. Carla tells everyone to stop. I remember the quiet. Even the birds had shut up. Just boots on dirt and that kind of dead stillness that feels too heavy for the woods. She asks Mitch if he can describe what he saw. Another long pause. Then he says, "It looks like a person, but taller. Way taller. I thought it was in shadow, but it's not. It's just wrong." I asked him directly, "Is it approaching you?" He says no. It just keeps its distance. Always behind. Never getting closer. Now, I've done this job long enough to know panic spreads fast. So we made the call to keep moving. Quicker pace. We didn't want to be stuck on that trail after dark. And honestly, we didn't know what else to do. No one wanted to go back and check. Not real proud of that. Every few minutes, Mitch would key in his mic and just say something like, "Still there," or "It moved again. Same distance." Then, nothing for a while. We came around one of the last bends, about 20 minutes from the base, and suddenly Mitch comes through the radio again, whispering this time. He says, "It's gone. It stopped following. Just gone." We didn't speak until we hit the trailhead and saw the trucks. Once we got the injured hiker loaded up, Mitch finally came up to me, pale as hell, just sweating through his uniform. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I don't think it wanted to catch up. I think it just wanted to be seen." Then he asked for a cigarette. Mitch didn't smoke. A few weeks later, he put in for a station transfer. Doesn't work backcountry anymore. Speaking of backcountry, I was stationed near a glacial spring, out in one of the lesser-traveled corners of the park. Not quite remote, but not near anything either. No main trail, no nearby campsite. Most of the people who ended up out there were either really lost or doing something like filming internet survival shows without a permit. I remember one spring morning, I got a call from a solo hiker. Calm voice. Said he came across a little girl sitting by the water, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Said she was barefoot, wearing a pale dress, legs in the water, just staring at the surface. He asked if there were any families camping nearby. Maybe she'd wandered off. I checked. Nothing. No kids in the park that weekend. No school groups. No permits filed. The place was empty outside of a few backpackers. That area of the park is known for sightings of a girl. It's normal to the point where we don't call in the search parties anymore unless there is a family or school group reporting a missing child. I told him to wait there and not approach her, just in case she'd run away or something. I called in back up and headed to the coordinates he gave me. By the time I got there, a couple hours later, he was gone. The girl too. But I did find something. A child's footprints in the mud by the spring, leading into the water. Boot prints leading away from the spring, which eventually turned into bare footprints. We eventually found the hiker a few miles south, totally disoriented, walking barefoot with no pack, like he'd just wandered off and forgotten everything. He didn't recognize me, didn't even remember calling. Got him back to the station and called medical. We still don't know what happened there. The lead at the time just shrugged it off as random exposure-induced psychosis, with a look that said, "Don't bother pushing this." And I didn't. We had several cases every year from this area that were chalked up to exposure-induced psychosis. If you liked your job, you nodded your head and agreed. Well, I liked my job. This next one, well, this one still bugs me because I know what I saw. I've replayed it 100 times in my head, wondering if I missed a detail that would explain everything. I was checking backcountry sites before the season opened. There's a list of primitive camp zones we rotate through. No designated pads, just flat ground with fire rings. You hike in, you hike out. No cell service. You get the idea. I hiked into one of the sites late in the afternoon. Sun was still out. When I reached the clearing, I saw a green dome tent already set up. I radioed it in. Figured someone got in early. No big deal. Maybe an off-the-books camper. Happens all the time. Nobody responded. Not from base, not from the other rangers. I walked around the tent. No movement inside, no gear outside, no fire ring, just a tent, completely zipped up. I called out. No response. I didn't want to open it, against protocol unless there's an emergency. So I left a warning tag on the flap of the tent and moved on. Slept at the next site over. Next morning, I looped back to see if they'd packed up. The clearing was empty. The warning tag I left? On the ground exactly where the tent was. Here's the thing. We're trained to identify disturbances in the natural environment. That's how we track lost hikers, find kids that wander off, track dangerous animals. You get the idea. The area where the tent was had no evidence at all of disturbance. The ground was still wet from the recent rain, and you could still see my footprint from the previous day. There were no other prints anywhere in the area. Completely undisturbed mud and grass. I didn't report it. I didn't want it written down. Maybe I didn't want anyone to ask me if I was tired, or stressed, or seeing things. That's the kind of thing that gets you sitting behind a desk instead of doing the actual job. I wasn't seeing things. There was a tent. And then there wasn't. This next one happened about 4 years ago. Early spring. I was doing solo trail maintenance, clearing debris after a windstorm. Pretty routine. I was about 8 miles deep on a horse trail that barely sees any foot traffic outside summer. I hear movement up ahead. Voices. Which was odd, because I didn't see any cars at the lower lot, and nobody signed in. But I kept walking. Eventually I round a bend, and there's this man standing in the trail. just standing, looking right at me. He's older, dressed in a long, dark coat, which doesn't make sense. Weather was sunny, pushing 70. He has no pack, no water, no hat, just standing in the middle of the trail like he's been waiting. I slow down and call out, ask if he needs help. He doesn't answer, just stares. Then, and I remember this part, like it's burned into my skull, he says my name, not just Ranger or Hey You, my full name. I stop walking. I ask who he is. He doesn't answer, doesn't move. Then he says my name again and adds, "You've been here too long." That's it. He turns around and walks straight into the woods. No trail, no hesitation, like he knows exactly where he's going. I followed maybe 20 feet in before I stopped myself. I lost him. I was following him. I looked down to check my footing, looked back up, and he was out of sight. No footprints, no sound, nothing. I called it in when I got back to the truck, gave a full description, timeline, everything. They told me there were no visitors in the area that day, no matching descriptions, no registered hikers, no missing persons. And they asked if I wanted to file a formal report. And of course I said no. I'm not going to sit down with my supervisor and tell them a detailed account of me losing my mind. Again, I like my job. This next one is one I don't like talking about. And not for the usual reasons. Not because it's too gory, or because anyone died, or because it made the news. It didn't. Nobody even knows about it except the two other guys I was out there with. And they don't bring it up, since they didn't experience it like I did. This happened about 7 years ago, early fall. A storm had blown through and lit up part of the forest with lightning. Dry season, full of old fuel. It was a nasty burn, controlled fast enough, but it still took a wide chunk out of the hillside. After a few weeks, fire crews are sent back in to do what we call flare scans, checking for smolder pockets, root fires, stuff that doesn't burn out clean. These fires can live underground for weeks, even months, waiting to come back to life. I wasn't supposed to be working this one, since it wasn't in my zone, but the original crew member was out that day. Me being such a great guy, jumped at the chance to help out. The reality, I was bored out of my skull at the time, was going through some family stuff at the time, wanted the distraction. Anyways, it was a 3-man job. Me, Ramirez, and Duffy. I'd worked with both of them before. Good guys, not jumpy, not the kind to spook easy. We hiked in around 9 a.m. The place still smelled like smoke. You ever smell a dead forest? It's not like a campfire. It's sour, like wet charcoal and rot and metal. Nothing moves. No birds, no bugs, no leaves. It's just black on black, all ash and silence. We split up about a quarter mile in to cover more ground, still in radio range, but out of sight from one another. We moved slow, scanning the ground, marking hot spots, tagging danger trees, routine stuff. Then, around midday, I heard a sound I still can't fully explain. It was a scream. It was long, piercing, but too clean. Not a cry for help, not panic. It just sounded like the purest pain you could imagine. It didn't fade in or out. It was just there, sudden, sharp, and cutting through the dead woods around me. I froze. My first thought was, wounded animal. It happens occasionally with these fires. It's not a clean death for larger animals that get injured and escape the inferno. I grabbed my radio, called it in, Ramirez thought I was messing around, said he hadn't heard anything. Duffy just asked if maybe I'd stepped on a buried gas pocket, laughing a little over the radio. Negative, I said, marking here and checking it out. I marked my spot with a flag and started heading toward where I thought the sound had come from. The burn zone got weirder the deeper I went. The trees were still standing, but some of them had been hollowed out from the inside, like the fire had eaten their cores but left the bark. I passed a deer skeleton that had been scorched black. Hard to tell if it died from the fires or before. And then I saw it. One tree, in the middle of this slope. Big, tall, still black from the burn, but not fallen like the rest. It looked wrong from the moment I laid eyes on it. Not because it was standing, because of what was around it. Everything in a perfect circle, 10, maybe 12 feet wide, was untouched. No ash, no signs of fire, just brown pine needles and moss, like the fire had skipped over that one spot on purpose. The tree itself was limbless, completely smooth, all the way up. And down the center of the trunk, maybe 6 feet tall, the bark was split open. Long ways, clean, like a mouth opening mid-scream. The inner wood was darker, rawer, almost wet-looking. And standing that close to it, I swear to God, I heard it breathe. Just once. Long. Dry. Like wind being dragged through a throat made of dust and smoke. I radioed back. Told the guys I was heading back to my mark. Said I'd found some hot spots that needed logging. Told them the noise was a wounded animal. Didn't mention the tree. I chalked up the breathing to the wind blowing through the newly hollowed out tree. I guess that made me feel better at the time. We regrouped back at the truck around sunset. Everyone quiet, tired. As we packed up, I clicked through our recorder log. We'd had a recorder on all day. Standard procedure in case we run into civilians where they shouldn't be after a fire. Right there, time-stamped to 12:13 p.m. was the sound. Not static, not interference. A scream, faint, distant, but clear. Same pitch, same tone, same tightness in my chest when I heard it the first time. I didn't play it a second time. It's unlikely anyone else checked these recordings. We only really use them when it's required to make an official report. Something like this. It's just easier to let it go. We've all seen and heard things out here. You don't want to be the guy making more work for everyone because you think a tree screamed at you. The next one is about Echo Trail. We don't talk much about Echo Trail anymore. Not because anything dramatic happened. No body found tied to a tree, no blood on the leaves, no official crime. In fact, that's the reason we don't talk about it. There's nothing to explain. No closure. Just a blank spot in the books and a few quiet decisions behind closed doors. It was early summer. We'd just reopened the higher elevation trails after the thaw. Echo Trail was one of the less popular loops. Steep, poorly maintained, overgrown in spots. It never made the brochure, but a few regulars liked it because it was quiet. Good views. No kids screaming about bugs. We had a new ranger that season, Bennett. Maybe mid-30s. Polite. Fit. Bit of a loner. Transferred in from another park. Good references. His file said he'd served in the military at some point, but he didn't talk about it. Seemed like the kind of guy who preferred trees to people. Which is fine. Out here. We assigned him to Echo Trail Patrol once a week. Routine check. Erosion. Signage. Wildlife cams. Make sure the switchbacks haven't washed out. It's a long loop. About 12 miles. But he handled it fine. For the first few weeks, his reports were clean. Standard notes. Sign at mile 4 post needs replacing. Deer carcass off trail near the ridge. That sort of thing. Then the reports started getting unusual. First one just said, trail echo inconsistent with distance. No elaboration. I figured he meant audio carry was weird due to the wind, or maybe he was trying to flag some geological shift, though I couldn't see how that was his call. I made a note to ask him, but forgot. Next week's report was a little stranger. Unusual echo response starting near mile 6. Sounds looped or delayed unnaturally. Recommend audio mapping. Again, no further detail. That one I did ask about. I caught him coming off shift and mentioned the line. He paused, kind of stared at me for a second, then shrugged and said, I think the trail's playing tricks. Might be a natural reverb pocket, or something more complex. You ever hear your own footsteps echo a full beat late? I said no. I hadn't. He didn't add anything else. He just continued out the door. 2 weeks later, I noticed something odd. The trail cams out on echo, motion-triggered wildlife monitors. They weren't uploading correctly. No signal, which happens sometimes due to cloud cover or battery drop. But when we checked the drives manually, they were empty. Like, not blank, wiped. No error logs, just zeroed. I had one of our tech guys look at the files. He said it wasn't a hardware failure. Looked intentional. Said they must have been cleared during a manual check. The only person with access to those cameras that week was Bennett. When I brought it up, he didn't deny it. Just said, some things don't need to be documented. After that, I pulled him off Echo and reassigned the trail to a senior guy, Langley. I didn't tell him anything. Just asked him to walk the loop, check the cameras, and give us a standard report. Langley came back 6 hours later, pale as hell. Not scared. Just blank. Like someone had left the fridge open inside his skull. I asked if he was okay. He said, that trail's wrong. I couldn't figure out why. I kept hearing myself walk, then stop, but I hadn't stopped yet. He said he heard someone call his name at mile marker 7. He was sure it was me. He started to answer before realizing it didn't make sense. He was several hours into the trail, and he and I had spoken on the radio minutes prior. It would be impossible for me to be out there. He finished the loop, but told me not to send him back. His report just said, nothing to document. Recommend decommissioning trail. The next time I was assigning trails for the month, I checked the file again. Bennett's trail reports were gone. All of them. I called my supervisor. She said it wasn't the first time a trail had gone cold like this. Some parks have quiet shutdowns, unofficial closures. They pull the signage, let the brush reclaim the path, and don't explain it to the public. When I asked her why, she said, if a trail starts behaving like it doesn't want to be found, it's best not to argue with it. That was several years ago. We don't patrol Echo anymore. The trailhead sign's still up, but the lot hasn't been maintained. People pass it on the way to better hikes and don't even notice. That's good. With something like this, we try to avoid putting up "Do Not Enter" signs, since we aren't aware of any specific danger, and those types of signs tend to attract thrill seekers and degenerate teenagers. No sign, no one cares. They just go to the better, more clear trails. Every so often, someone will come into the station and say they tried the loop, got turned around, thought they were making good time, but somehow ended up back at mile 3 after walking for hours. said the birds had stopped, said they heard voices, said they saw movement behind them, said the echo came first. And every time I tell them the same thing. You probably wandered off trail. I'd stick to the main clear trails. Then I mark down their name, log it under a code no one cares about, and file it with the rest. Okay, next one. So, we used to have this overlook trail, long loop, mostly elevation gain. Popular in the fall when the leaves turned. It had 9 switchbacks carved into the hillside before it opened up to a bluff with a decent view of the valley. For the less outdoor savvy, a switchback is just a zigzag path moving up steep terrain. Think a steep hill that you can't directly climb safely. This particular one, we used to call it Switchback 9. Trail still exists, technically, but we haven't kept it maintained in years. I'll explain why. It started with hiker reports. At first, just the usual stuff. Strange person on trail. Felt like we were being watched. That kind of thing. Normally that doesn't raise red flags. People get spooked in the woods all the time. But there was consistency in the description. Always a man. Always tall. Very thin. Long dark jacket. Never moving. Just standing in the brush, off trail. Always peeking around trees. Always near switchback number 9. We'd send a ranger out. Someone would sweep the trail. Never found anyone. No trash, no tracks. No sign of squatting or camping. Still, the reports kept coming. I started keeping a log, unofficially. Between mid-September and early November that year, we got 12 separate visitor statements describing the exact same figure, standing in the same spot. Then one of our seasonal workers, Nate, came back early from a solo trail cleanup. I remember he looked shaken, but not in a dramatic way. He was just tight, like something was locked up inside him. I asked him what happened. He said, "I saw the guy from the reports." I asked what he did. He said, "Nothing." He just stood there, staring at me. Then I blinked, and he was gone. I tried to get more, but Nate just kept saying it was like static. That was his word. He didn't say it was supernatural. Didn't say ghost or anything like that. Just static. Like something that wasn't supposed to be there, fuzzing in and out. A few weeks later, a solo hiker went missing on that trail. Woman in her 40s. Strong. Experienced. Logged in at the visitor center. Estimated a 4-hour hike. Weather was fine. She never came back. We launched a search within 12 hours. Full team. Drones. Dogs. Helicopters. The works. We found her car, her footprints at the start of the trail, and we found where she stepped off the path near switchback 9, broken brush, a torn glove caught on a branch. Then nothing. No scent trail. No boot prints. No sign of a struggle. It was like she stepped off the trail and vanished in 5 feet of forest. The case stayed open for a year. Family eventually held a service. No remains ever found. Then the following season, new reports started coming in. Same man, same location, same behavior. That's when we pulled the plug. It wasn't my decision. I guess the brass just didn't want media attention surrounding the park. Person goes missing, creepy sightings, you get the idea. We didn't make an announcement or issue a formal closure. We just removed the signage, deactivated the online map listing, and let the forest grow over that section of trail. We redirected hikers to other overlooks, trails we could trust. Here's the last part I'll say, and then I'm done. We had a trail cam placed near Switchback 9 during the search effort, one of the older models. Wasn't intended to find the missing woman, just to log wildlife movement in case we caught anything useful. When we pulled the data around the time the woman went missing, most of it was uneventful. Raccoons, deer, normal stuff. These cameras take multiple pictures whenever there is movement. It's not unusual to have 15 or 20 pictures of a single instance of a deer walking by. But listen to this. Time-stamped 4 days after she went missing. There was a single picture of a barely visible man standing just off trail. He wasn't moving. His face was blurry. Not motion blur, just out of focus. He was wearing a long dark coat, hands at his sides, no pack, no gear, and his head was tilted just slightly. We passed it around the office. Nobody wanted to claim it meant anything. I put the SD card in the file, which is our standard practice. And yes, they are physical paper files with handwritten notes. We only scan the files into digital for police reports. Anyways, I went back and grabbed that file a few days later to show a coworker the image, and the SD card was missing. I poked my head into my supervisor's office and asked if she knew where it went. She just shrugged and said, "Police department took it. It's out of my hands." Anyways, trail's still there if you know where to look, but the markers are gone. Things happen at the parks, and sometimes they just don't get escalated. A hiker sees something unusual, reports it. If there's no emergency, that report goes into a file in a cabinet and is never seen again. There isn't much else to say on that. Moving on. There's a fire lookout tower about 6 miles out from our main station. It's not staffed anymore. Hasn't been since the 90s. But we still maintain the trail to it and use it for backcountry shelter if a ranger's doing a multi-day patrol. Metal frame, wooden platform, 360-degree view of the ridgeline. Solid structure, even if it creaks in high wind. Inside the tower is a logbook, just a weather-sealed binder with lined pages, the kind we keep in remote spots for trail crews or passing rangers to jot down notes. Nothing official, just general observations. Storm approaching from the west. Saw bear sign. Radio weak. We don't keep track of it closely. Once a season, someone hikes out, replaces the binder if it's full or water damaged. About 2 years ago, I went out to do one of those checks. It was late fall. No one else was on the trail. Permit logs were empty that week. Weather was overcast, but calm. When I got to the tower, everything looked normal. No signs of vandalism or squatters. Door was shut. Lock wasn't tampered with. But inside the logbook, something was off. The first few pages were what I expected. Notes from the last few years. Scattered handwriting. Field notes. Someone drew a crude topo sketch. But then, further in, the tone changed. Page after page, dozens of them, filled with writing. Same handwriting, same pen, no breaks. Each entry started with a date and time, like a journal. But the dates didn't make sense. Some were out of order. Some were dated ahead, like they were written weeks or months into the future. The entries weren't frantic. They were dry, technical, like someone was logging environmental data or charting wind directions. But nothing lined up with reality. Here's an example, word for word, from one entry. No birds again, no insects. Trees are rotating subtly. No one else has arrived. Noise in the floorboards stopped for now. I flipped a few more pages. Still no sleep. The lights on the far ridge haven't moved in 3 nights. Tower seems taller than before. Pressure steady. Every entry was like that. Precise. Clinical. Completely disconnected from anything happening in the park. No names. No mention of weather conditions, crew check-ins, or trail names. The farther I went, the worse it got. The clouds are lower. Can hear movement under the tower. No confirmation from station. Will continue recording. That one had a faint circle drawn under it. Looked like a crude map of the tower, with dots marked around the base. I stopped reading. Flipped to the end. The last entry was undated. It just said, "Entry concluded. Recommend sealing tower. Repetition has begun." I took the binder, hiked it out, and handed it to my supervisor. Told her exactly what I found. She skimmed it, didn't say much. Said it was probably a prank. Old ranger messing around. Kids with time on their hands. I asked if we should report it to anyone higher up. Her exact words were, "If it's not a safety issue, let it die in a drawer." The binder was placed in the storage room at HQ, where we keep old gear and unused signage. No case file, no follow-up. It was never scanned or catalogued. 3 months later, I checked the storage room during an inventory run. The binder was gone. No sign-out sheet, no disposal log. Nobody at the station remembered moving it. I haven't gone back to the tower since. Not because I'm scared, just because I don't see the point anymore. So, moving on. This next one, I was less involved in, so I'll piece it together with what I know. We got the call just after 4 p.m. A hiking group came into the ranger station. 6 people, all mid-30s, experienced, calm, but clearly shaken. They said their friend had vanished on trail, not wandered off, not lagged behind. Vanished. Sure. They'd been doing the Pine Loop, popular route, moderate difficulty, well trafficked in the summer. They were about 4 miles in, mid-descent from the ridge, walking single file. One of them stopped to retie a boot. Everyone paused. The guy in front, Jason, stepped around a bend, maybe 20 feet ahead. No running, no talking, just walking. They followed him within seconds. He was gone. No sound, no movement, no response to shouting. They thought maybe he stepped off to relieve himself, or took a wrong turn. But it's a clear trail. No forks, no terrain changes, just a wide dirt path with switchbacks. They searched for an hour, then came straight to us. We dispatched 2 rangers and a medic team immediately. Weather was good, visibility fine, no cliffs, no water crossings. We found the spot easily. The dirt was soft from recent rain. 6 sets of prints were visible, all spaced evenly. And then 5. Jason's footprints stopped mid-step. 1 heel print, mid-stride. No pivot, no slide. Just 1 final step, and then nothing. No signs of struggle, no drag marks, no animal sign. Just trail. We spent the next 4 days combing the hillside. Drones, dogs, volunteers. 0 sign. Not a backpack strap, not a broken branch, no scent trail. It was like he walked out of the air. The group stayed in town for a week, talked to every ranger, told the same story every time. Not one of them changed their account. After the 3rd day, one of them asked if anything like this had happened before. I told them no. That was a lie. There were other examples. Late spring, clear weather, busy but not packed. Families barbecuing, dogs running around, kids playing near the water. I was doing rounds, walking the perimeter of the lake loop, chatting with visitors, checking trash levels, otherwise known as tourist duty. At around 1:40 p.m, we got a report from a couple, both in their 30s, visiting from out of town, saying their daughter had gone missing. 7 years old, blonde, wearing a pink shirt with a fox on it. She'd been playing by a large flat rock about 20 feet from the picnic tables. They said they turned around for maybe 10 seconds to grab a juice box, turned back, and she was gone. At first, we assumed she wandered into the trees to use the bathroom. Happens all the time with kids. They get curious, chase a bug, go off trail a little too far. We organized a quick area sweep, walked the shoreline, called out, asked other families nearby. Nothing. Within 30 minutes, we had 3 rangers on site, all combing the tree line. This area isn't all that remote. We have cameras covering the public picnic areas almost entirely. One of the cameras captured the girl playing on the rock. She was facing towards the camera, sitting there tapping things with a stick she was holding. Suddenly, she drops the stick, freezes up, and looks behind her over her right shoulder. She sat like that, completely still for a few seconds, before climbing up and over the rocks, dropping out of sight on the opposite side. The thing is, you can see the left side and the right side of the rock from the video perspective. She must have barely dropped out of sight and walked or crawled directly into the forest, not changing the angle or direction she was walking at all. We brought in dogs. They caught a scent at the rock, followed it for about 50 feet into the trees, and then stopped cold. Not faded, not lost, stopped, like someone turned off a switch. We expanded the search. 20 volunteers, dogs, drones, everything. We searched for 3 days straight. No shoe, no fabric, no broken branches, no signs of struggle, no sign she'd ever been more than 20 feet from that rock. The parents stayed on site the entire time, never left. By the end of the 3rd day, the mother wasn't speaking anymore. The father just kept asking the same question over and over. How do you lose someone in just a couple seconds? We didn't have an answer then. Still don't. There was no one suspicious on camera. No one saw anything. No exit point. She was never found. This one was difficult. I took a couple weeks off after this. That video. The girl peacefully playing. Really rough. Last one. We used to use the North Service Road as a maintenance access, mostly for moving fencing materials and water tanks to one of the old backcountry stations, Station 3. The road wasn't open to the public, and by the time I started working there, even most of the rangers didn't bother using it. It was overgrown, washed out in places, and half the year it wasn't even passable by truck. But every now and then, when the main trail was snowed in or blocked, someone would take it. Just slow driving, careful steering, and a lot of branches to clear. That's what I was doing. Clearing downed limbs after a windstorm, checking on the water cache at Station 3, basic prep for the next rotation. It was late afternoon when I drove in. I was alone, which was normal. No service out there, which was also normal. The road splits at a T-junction around mile 4. One direction leads to Station 3. The other dead ends at a ridge line. Nothing back there except some old fire breaks and overgrown hunting trails. As I came up on the junction, I noticed something. There were tire tracks going toward the dead end, which shouldn't have been possible. That road hadn't been cleared in months, and it was mostly washed out after the last rain. But these were fresh, maybe a day or two old, and narrow, not a park vehicle, Looked like a small SUV or crossover. Passenger tires, uneven tread. Someone had driven in, over deep ruts, into an area we didn't advertise or maintain. I stopped the truck and got out. I walked about 40 yards up the dead-end spur and saw something I didn't like. There were boot prints, a single set, walking in, spaced out evenly, straight line, no stagger, no hesitation, but no prints coming back out. I followed them another few dozen yards until the brush got too thick to move through without a machete. I didn't see any sign of a person or a vehicle, and there were no branches broken higher up, which meant they didn't turn off the trail. They just walked forward into waist-high brush and disappeared. I made a note to come back with another ranger and flag the spot with tape. I went back to the truck, took the other fork, finished my run to Station 3. I camped there overnight. Next morning, I backtracked to the junction. The tire tracks were still there, but the unfamiliar boot prints were gone. Mine from the day prior had remained. I followed my own footprints, retracing my steps. I promise you, there were another entirely unique set of boot prints just the day before. The flagged tape was still tied where I left it, fluttering like nothing had touched it. But the ground was clean. No sign anyone other than me had ever walked through. I stood there for a long time. I don't scare easy. This wasn't fear. It was just that heavy, stalled feeling, like being halfway through a sentence and forgetting what you were saying, except with your whole body. I marked it in my log, not as a missing person, not even as suspicious, just unexplained activity at end service junction. Will monitor. That was it. I checked the cam footage from the main service gate the next week. We keep motion-activated trail cams posted for vehicle logs. Not real time, but decent coverage. This gate is one of the methods we use to keep out the general public from unmaintained roads. The occasional poacher will take off their license plate, pick or break the lock on the gate, and camp out there. But the general public just turns around and takes another road. Anyways, I checked the logs for the week leading up to my discovery of those tracks. No footage of a car going in, none of one coming out. But sometime around 2:14 a.m., 2 nights before I got there, the camera triggered. Frame shows the empty gate. Next frame, 18 seconds later, gate open. No vehicle, no person, just open. Next frame, 5 minutes after that, gate closed again. I reported the malfunction. Got a form response from the district office that said they'd look into it. They didn't. I filed a follow-up note in the district log and brought it up during the next morning meeting. They said it was probably old tracks, maybe a poacher or a local cutting through the back edge of the park. Maybe the boot prints were mine, and I didn't realize. I knew that wasn't the case, but I didn't push it. We never found a vehicle. No other visitors logged in or out during that week. And the trail cam that caught the gate open? It stopped transmitting a few days later. Technical fault. The junction's still there. We haven't used it in years. No maintenance, no patrols. It's not closed officially. We just don't go that way anymore. Thanks for listening to me. It feels good to get things off my chest sometimes. And please, if you go to a national park, just be careful. Stick to the trails. If you're ever out in nature and you feel like something is wrong or off, it probably is. Just keep your head down and leave deliberately and safely. Until next time.